On this episode, we're going to be turning these die-cast cars into this.
Dome Runners TV, your guide to the Underhive and beyond.
Hey there, scabby scummers and gangers. Crimson Oracle here with another episode of Dome Runners TV. Today, I'm going to be showing you the process by which I made some die-cast cars into terrain for your post-apocalyptic gaming. It can be used for This Is Not a Test, Wasteland Warfare, any kind of modern stuff where you're dealing with ruins, anything from Priapat to like just some cars that got left in the woods. This is a very simple project. It took about, an hour and 20 minutes or so in order to get it from start to finish. Obviously with some wait times for drawing and whatnot. This was a really nice addition to my Wasteland Warfare terrain because I am out of resin at the moment and I did want some more cars. I printed 2 of the Corvegas, but I wanted a little bit of variety. And these are, classic old cars that very much fit with the aesthetics of what Fallout was going for. And they also fit in with modern stuff, but just because these kinds of cars are the most likely to be found rotted and, ancient. So I think it works really well, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. You could, of course, stop before the step of adding vegetation if you wanted something that was in a drier climate that doesn't have, that kind of reclaimed by nature kind of feel to it. But I'm going for that sort of look because my Fallout terrain is kind of inspired by collapsing infrastructure that I've witnessed in and around places that I live and where I've kind of done some urban exploring. Since the game was going to be taking place in the Baltimore area, I wanted to kind of keep it real with what, my sort of experience of this sort of environment actually is. So that's why I've gone with this kind of overgrown look. I'm definitely going to have to add some trees and stuff in order to really round out this terrain collection, but overall it's going really well, and I'm hoping to actually do some Wasteland Warfare games very soon. I did want to mention, of course, that the show now has an Etsy shop, so if you are at all interested in helping support the show, you can find links to that in the show description. And of course, there's various shirts referencing the fake advertisers that appear on this show, and I'm hoping to add some that tie into locations and made up places in my upcoming campaign for Fallout Charm City is what I'm going to be calling it. So yeah, let's get to the cars.
If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and for as little as $2 a month you can become a patron and help support the show.
The first step of this project is to disassemble the cars. This is, generally speaking, pretty straightforward. There's screws at the bottom, and most of the pieces are not attached in any sort of permanent fashion. The doors are fixed by a little metal tab, but that was easy to cut off, and then you just work those off. And of course, you could leave the doors on if you wanted a more intact ruin, but I wanted these to be more like the sort of burnt-out husks that you see walking around in Fallout, so that's what I was going for. And I was careful to break the windows rather than removing completely in the truck. I wound up popping out the windows in the Beetle. For that one, I wound up gluing them back in later. Pop the tires off of the wheel hubs, and then you're going to wind up using the little nipper to get the hubs off because they are attached pretty tight. I glue the wheel axle in as I want that to remain as though the wheels were pulled off, and then it's time to put the vehicle back together. And I'm going to wind up gluing the truck back together rather than using these screws, just because I'm not planning on ever taking it apart again. And for the Beetle, the process is pretty much just the same. The internals on the Beetle, I decided to pull these seats out because I wanted to see what that would look like, and that did wind up involving a little bit more work of sort of cutting it apart. And once again, we glue the vehicle together. Now, because these are die-cast metal vehicles, you're going to need some really heavy snippers in order to do any physical damage to them. You don't necessarily have to go through this step in order to get a good-looking final product. You can make a perfectly good wreck of a vehicle without doing any actual structural damage just by putting texture over it later, but I wanted a more authentic look, like something that had been kind of flaking apart from rust and maybe had been potentially used as cover in a firefight at some point and had taken damage from various sources. And so each of these vehicles I took the clippers to with abandon. The gearbox for the truck was sticking out at the bottom, so I had to do some clipping in order to properly remove that. Once the models are properly beaten up, I come in with my patented mixture of ballast and sand and PVA and paint, and that goes down, creating not just texture but also a base coat that will actually stick to this glossy enamel paint. I come in with a brown craft store paint in order to cover up the existing paint that's left showing, kind of create a more uniform base. It does not cover everything perfectly, but that's okay because we're going to come in with a coat of dark silver pro acryl in order to put a base down. You could use any dark silver from any particular line. I just happen to really like the pro acryl colors. They are incredibly pigment dense and they make my job easier. Next, I come in and stipple on pro acryl coal black. I start with a sponge, but this layer, it's actually not that important for the sponging because we're going to do another layer of sponging later. So I wind up using one of my old makeup brushes. And then I come in with dark golden brown and stipple in the same way. You're wanting to kind of create the appearance of dark, rusty areas that are especially around areas of wear and tear and corners. And then I come back in with that same craft store brown. I like to use multiple browns, and that is owing to the fact that if you look at rust, there are a lot of varieties of color in any given rust, lots of different browns. And then we come back in with the sponge doing the Pro Acryl Coal Black, and we're going to put that all over. Now around the areas where we did the black sponging, we are then going to come in with some silver, and that is representing the metal showing through. So you'll make sure you only do that in spots where it's actually metal. Here's where I would usually use streaking grime, but I find that the Pro Acryl Dark Camo Green works just fine and has the right kind of tone and depth of color for this application. So I put it in not, you don't want to do it as much as the brown. You want to make sure there's lots of brown still showing through. And now for our final stippling, we're going to put in orange, and you want to do that kind of around areas of wear. Don't want to do too much of the orange, it can be overpowering, but it will tone down as it dries. Next up, we do a weathering powder, Vallejo European Earth. I like to put a bunch on my makeup brush and then dust it onto the model, letting it kind of fall naturally. And we're going to come back around and fix this in a moment using some white spirit, and you want to use the capillary action of the white spirit. So you want your brush to get wet and you just kind of let it flow through the pigment, and it will help it settle and stay down, at least at first. When it dries, you will be able to then work with the dust later. If you want to, for example, do a more permanent fix, you can just do a simple varnish. And then I like to, while it's still wet, add just a little bit of the Vallejo dark red ochre over top, because that's going to give us some nice bright red rust, which we didn't really do any reds. We mostly stuck to oranges and browns. Let it dry completely, and then you're going to bring Vallejo rain marks in, because of course this vehicle is out in the elements. I like to do this in a very sparing amount. It adds just a little bit more color variation and a more sort of feeling of wear and weathering. And now for the fun part. We are going to be using white glue and various foliage and flock to really make these vehicles seem like they've been reclaimed by nature. So I'm putting glue down and then I'm putting flock down. And this kind of flock, if you do a coating of the varnish afterward, you will get a better hold on it. Otherwise, you will probably lose some over time. And I like to really kind of creep in and put lots of pieces inside of the vehicles and in flat areas where the foliage and decaying matter might fall and form soil, and eventually you wind up with, a car becoming completely overrun. I particularly really like this bushy stuff that I got at my local game store. It comes off and you have to kind of cut it because it comes in like a big mat, and it really looks great when you add it. And next I'm going to add these gamer grass flower tufts. These things really help make the thing look like it's really growing. And now we come in with some dirty down rust just along the edges, and it is going to give you just a really nice, beautiful, bright orange kind of rust, like more fresh rust. And I like to do that kind of in areas where there's been some disturbance or action or decay, where there's new rust activity happening. You start to see the reaction happening in previous spots that you put this substance down on, and it really is fun. It looks really natural and organic, and it just really works. And yeah, I really like to use this as a finisher. You can overdo it with the dirty down, but it is an absolute goat of things to have in your tool belt. It makes rust just so much fun. And, I'm someone whose rust recipe didn't really need this addition, but I like to throw it in anyway. And last but certainly not least, we come in with a little bit of the Vallejo lichen and moss effect paint, and just put a tiny little bit on various points on the model, because of course lichen and moss will stick to just about anything. And there you have it. The model has been completely rendered into a wreck. And yeah, this is one of my favorite things to do. I really like taking inexpensive toys and turning them into awesome wargaming terrain. And of course, these are really perfect for Fallout, since they have that kind of classic car look to them. The Beetle is a little bit out of scale for Wasteland Warfare, just a teeny tiny bit, but the truck is essentially perfect. A few more of these will really help pad out my selection for my Wasteland Warfare highway wreckage. Thanks, as always, to Carl Casey of White Bat Audio for the show's music. And of course, thank you to my patrons. You guys make all of this possible. You guys are the best. And for as little as $2 a month, you too can become a patron over at patreon.com/domerunners and help support this content and see more of it. And of course, don't forget to check out the podcast, domerunners.buzzsprout.com. I had a new episode this week about the Outlands campaign for Necromunda. And of course, everybody please stay safe and don't forget to change your paint water.